Hey, what up anyone who's watching? This is View with Ice, the channel where we talk about anime and TV shows, and today we are going to be talking about one of the most badass anime characters of all time, the one and only Roanoa Zoro. Zoro is one of the most badass characters in One Piece, and for that he has a lot of badass moments, but today we are only going to be focusing on 10 of those badass moments. I am not going to include the Zoro vs Kuma moment because I feel it's a little bit overplayed. Although it's one of the best scenes, I am going to focus more on some underrated scenes. Like and subscribe for more anime and TV show related content, and please tell me about your favorite Zoro moments in the comment section. And with that out of the way, let's go take a look at some of Zoro's most badass moments in One Piece. One of the longest running gags in the story is Zoro always getting lost. Zoro arriving first at Sabaody was already strange, so him getting lost almost immediately after arriving was probably just the universe balancing itself out. Since Zoro was the first of the crew to arrive on the island, he had nothing to do. So he went up to a fisherman and asked him if he could join him fishing, probably just to remedy his boredom. The fisherman agrees and he says Zoro must go and board his boat and wait for him. So of course, in classic Zoro fashion, Zoro goes and boards the wrong boat, which is a pirate ship setting out for the New World. As the ship set sail and went underwater of Fishman Island, Zoro, who was sleeping on deck, woke up and with one slice cuts the entire ship in half. This was a funny and stupid Zoro moment, but at the same time it was badass. It was also a display of how strong he got after the 2 years, because before the time skip we never saw Zoro cutting up an entire ship, and this was not a normal ship, it was a galleon. This in defeating Dust Bones aka Mr. One was why Zoro got his first bounty of 60 million berry on his first wanted poster. The Straw Hats, although a strong pirate group, is also a very gullible group, and they get very easily tricked by the bounty hunters on Whiskey Peak. There is of course a few exceptions, and those are Nami and Zoro. After a suspiciously warm welcome, these bounty hunters show their true colors, but Zoro is not one to be easily tricked as he stops these bounty hunters in their tracks. Zoro almost immediately turned into a one-man army, taking on 100 bounty hunters alone. There is also one specific scene that is super badass where Zoro is confronted by Miss Monday, who is a very muscular character. He easily overpowers her after she caught him off guard, and he showcases his physical strength by defeating her, basically just crossing her head with his one hand. This moment right here is still fresh in our memories, but not putting this on a list will be disrespect, because this is what you call a top tier badass moment. After Zoro had to give up his sword, he was in search of a replacement, and he was given this sword by Iori. This is the exact same sword that was held by Kozuki Oden, and it is one of the two swords that was able to give Kaido the permanent scar on his chest. Enma is one of the 21 great swords, and I can say that this sword is definitely deserving of the title great, because just the demonstration of the sword's ability was able to cut a big piece off a cliff, and Zoro didn't even put that much effort into this attack. The sword is very special as the sword is able to draw out the haki of a user, and although at the time Zoro had not yet mastered the sword, Zoro was able to get his haki back out of the sword almost immediately, showing us just how skilled Zoro is with a blade, and also showing us his mastery of haki. I know recently in the manga Zoro did some incredible things that probably trumps this as his biggest feat, but since I'm only talking about the anime, this is definitely his biggest feat so far. Pika in a sense has a very OP devil fruit because he's able to manipulate almost any stone. He can move freely through stone and is able to morph stone to his will, as seen as he created the giant stone golem the size of an entire town. Zoro was also basically OP the entire fight because everything he did against Pika looked very easy. Zoro cut Pika's giant stone golem form in half, and he then proceeded to cut the golem until he found Pika's real body. Although this is a very badass and impressive scene, I'm not gonna put this very high up on the list because I feel Zoro basically flexed right throughout this fight. Pika even went full bodied haki, and Zoro still cut him down like it was nothing. I want more grinding and struggling because I feel that a struggling fight is more impressive than something you can just breeze through. Ori Jones vs Zoro is a brief encounter, but it is definitely one of the most disgustingly underrated moments in the One Piece story. At this specific time in the story, the Straw Hats were fresh from the time skip, and we all were curious to see how much they have grown. And what Zoro did here made me even more curious because this was basically just one big flex. What makes this so impressive is the fact that Zoro defeated a fishman underwater. Hody Jones was of course not a very OP character, but since he was a fishman, he had a very distinct advantage over Zoro. Firstly, Jones is a fishman and he is far stronger underwater than he is above. Secondly, Jones has the ability to breathe underwater. And thirdly, a fishman's attacks are stronger underwater. And despite all of that advantage, Zoro was still able to defeat the main protagonist of the Fishman arc in only one blow, and what makes it even more impressive is the fact that Zoro defeated Hody underwater after only taking one big breath. Now before I get into this fight had some slight controversy considering the animation, but I would just like to say that this is an anime and it is very common for anime to exaggerate scenes like these. It is definitely over the top, but that's to expect if you're an anime watcher. After some decent back and forth clashing, Zoro gets distracted by a second attack coming in and Kamazo was able to land in an attack, capitalizing on the distraction. One of the most badass things about this fight is the fact that after the distraction, Zoro gets impaled by Kamazo's weapon. Kamazo of course takes his weapon back after the attack, but Zoro basically flexed his muscles so much that a character with the strength of Kamazo was unable to pull the weapon out of his body. And to top it all off, Zoro takes the same weapon he was impaled with and uses it to complete his 3-sword style and then proceeds to defeat Kamazo with his own weapon. This is the moment that solidified Zoro as one of my favorite characters in the anime. Zoro was basically washed this entire fight, but just his drive to fight and his audacity is what made this so incredible to watch. This is not only a badass moment for Zoro, because I can't ignore Hawkeye's flex as he defeated Zoro, who was basically going all out with only his pocket knife. Another badass moment is when Zoro called out Mihok to cut him with his main sword. Hawkeye could have of course easily killed Zoro with one strike, but the wound he gave Zoro could still have easily killed a lesser man. And that specific wound makes Zoro even more badass because even with that injury, he went on to Arlong Park into basically a mini war and came out victorious with the other Stroids. This is just another showcase of Zoro's endurance, stamina and willpower. From the start it was pretty obvious that Zoro was stronger than Monet because he was basically pulling punches in a sense, but we would have never known specifically how this fight would end. The fight scene was pretty standard with a few clashes here and there and a little bonus fight with the Sigi. I really liked the Sigi and it was really fun to see a fight even though it was brief. The best thing about this encounter was how Zoro finished off Monet. This was basically just an act of pure intimidation and bloodlust. Monet is a Logia fruit user, and what we know about these devil fruit users is that they can reassemble their body after being cut physically if there is no haki involved. Monet was so intimidated by Zoro's presence that she was unable to gather herself and restructure her back to a physical form after he cut her. Zoro took mercy on her, but just the realization of him using his haki and cutting her in half terrified her so much that he struggled to put herself back together again. This was truly a great flex by Zoro by defeating Monet psychologically. The Alabasta arc is truly one of the best arcs in the entire One Piece story. It features a lot of comedy and also it features a lot of badass moments, and this is definitely one of the best. Mr. One's Devil Fruit ability basically makes him a man of steel. He was therefore someone very difficult for Zoro to defeat since Zoro could not cut steel at the time. This fight was very tough on Zoro because he was basically on defense for the majority of the fight because he could not damage Mr. One due to his fruit power. Mr. One landed some heavy attacks on Zoro which would have sorely killed a lesser man. In the middle of the fight, Zoro was getting bashed, slashed, Zoro was getting destroyed, but Zoro started to grow and he started to push past his limits and he was able to cut right through Mr. One's steel exterior. Some people say Zoro unlocked haki, but I just believe that is Zoro's years of training and experience coming into play. My favorite kind of anime fight is where the character struggles throughout the fight and adapts his skill during battle, and this is exactly why this is so high on this list. Being OP is awesome, but I feel the grind leads to a more emotional battle, and the emotional factor makes the fight even more worthwhile to watch. If anyone has gotten to this point in the video, you probably think I am a madman because I put this as number 1, but this is a list of Zoro being a badass and not a list of Zoro showcasing his power, and for that reason, this is deserving of the number 1 spot on our list today. You can be a badass in a lot of different ways. You can be a badass defeating enemies, and you can be a badass flexing your way through fights. But are you such a badass that you would go to the extreme of cutting off your own leg just for the sake of continuing a fight? The Zoros are definitely a crazy band of pirates, and this moment definitely proves that Zoro belongs to this group. I feel a lot of people remember the scene, but they tend to overlook it due to the flashy moments that have been showcased throughout the story, but this is definitely something that should not be overlooked. Zoro, Nami and Vivi got caught by Mr. Tree and couldn't escape due to his wax rash food powers, and the wax basically gets hard as steel, and at the time Zoro could not yet cut steel, and he thought he would improvise by freeing himself in a very different way. What makes this moment so great is the fact that Zoro wasn't bluffing. Zoro was actually busy cutting his legs. Had it not been for the arrival of Luffy, Karu and Usopp, he probably would have gone through with his plan. This is exactly the type of reason why Zoro is one of the most badass characters in One Piece and just a badass character in a general conversation of anime.